والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطيبين الطاهرين. Manaf from the tribe of Quraysh is the best creation of Allah and His final prophet and messenger sent to all humans and jinn, and he is truthful about everything that they claim to be upon the truth, and many people that claim to be follow. But both of those, they are blameworthy, and both of those, they will be held accountable. So that's, which means those ignorant people that they put themselves in those positions that they are not entitled to or qualified to take those positions of being someone who is asked religious questions, or someone who they are sought by the people for religious guidance. Those people, they are misguided because they are ignorant, and the answers that they give are incorrect, therefore misguiding others, and those others will be misguided. So the way to defeat that, or the way to be, was attributed to a scholar, and there is an explicit blasphemous statement that does not have an alternative. A formidable imam or a known imam, we say, they would not say such a thing, rather it was planted in their books. So we got to the chapter of defending the chosen, defending the Prophet ﷺ from some of the matters that are falsely said about him. We got to warning against reading in books that are not reliable because of what they contain of planted, slanderous material and lies and stories of the children of Israel, what are known as al-Isra'iliyat. Al-Isra'iliyat basically is a term that the scholars they use to refer to stories that the children of Israel used to say and make up about the prophets that are not befitting. And not only just about the prophets, but also about the angels. Sometimes they would make up stories about the angels as well. And this is what they used to say. And sometimes the Muslims, they would mention some of these stories, not out of believing in them or concurring, but just to show that this is what the children of Israel used to say about the prophets. But some people, they did not have the ability to distinguish. They could not tell the difference between what was correctly narrated with a connected chain, with an authentic chain, and some of these fabricated stories, these children of Israel stories. And so they mixed it together. And so that's why sometimes there are some of those things that when you read them or hear about them, you might shudder, and you might feel like trembling, your skin is trembling, your skin is crawling from hearing how abhorrent some of these stories are. So we're going to warn from some of these books. Among them is the book called Qasasul Anbiya, that is authored by Abdul Wahhab al-Najjar. So this is a person that he passed away in the year 1360 after the Hijrah. So not too long ago. Right now we're in the year 1447. So this person, any less than 100 years ago, and he's from the year, or a little bit more than 100 years ago, from the year, less than 100, from the year 1360. So we haven't gotten to 60 yet, so less than 100 years ago he passed away. He was an Egyptian author. He was a lawyer, and then he was appointed as a teacher of literature and Sharia in a school or university known as the University of Al-Khurtum. And then he was called a professor, and he got promoted to the status of professor in Islamic history in the old Egyptian university. And then he became a manager or a dean, if you want to call it, or a principal or a supervisor for the school called Uthman Mahir Basha until the end of his life. He authored several books. Among them is the book called Qasas al-Anbiya, which is famously known in English as Stories of the Prophets. So we're going to warn against this book because it contains what goes against the creed of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Among what it contains is his saying, and of course, when we say these things, remember these are misguided sayings. This person, what he says, it is incorrect. So what he says is that Allah Ta'ala willed to verify to the angels in reality and to show them what they did not know and to clarify for them that Adam, the one who they degraded, which of course the angels would not degrade Prophet Adam alayhi salam. So basically he says words that attribute degrading Prophet Adam to the angels. So he's trying to, I guess, use some sort of literary style, but because he misunderstood, of course, he did not follow the principles, which is that the angels, they are all righteous Muslims, they never disobey Allah, they never blaspheme. So he said basically that the angels, they degraded Adam, or that they thought low of him, and that Allah Ta'ala was clarifying for the angels that Prophet Adam alayhi salam has a high status and a high honor, and that he is not at the level that they thought he was, because they supposedly were degrading him. Of course, this is not true. The angels would never do that. The angels would never degrade or think low of a prophet, because the angels, they are all righteous Muslims. So that's one thing. So the response to that claim of his is to say that angels, they never object to Allah, and they would not degrade or think lowly of any of the prophets of Allah. The angels, they are clear and free of that. As for what's mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, قالوا, this ayah, قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء, is not referring to Prophet Adam. The meaning of the verse is that the angels cause corruption on the earth and spill blood and shed blood unjustly. And so of course the angels, they don't object to Allah, and of course that question is not referring to Prophet Adam alayhi salam. فليس المراد به آدم عليه السلام إنما المراد به أن صنف البشر الذين كتب الله أنهم سيكونون خلفاء في الأرض فيهم من هذه صفتهم. So what's meant by this ayah is that there would be a kind of humans that Allah Ta'ala willed that they would exist, and that they would be rulers upon the earth, and this would be their attribute, that they cause corruption and that they spill blood, and unjustly. Because those angels, they knew that the human beings who are the offspring of Prophet Adam alayhi salam, this would occur from some of them. You might ask, how would the angels know that, etc.? Of course, you know that Allah Ta'ala allows the angels to copy from the guarded tablet from certain information. So the saying of this person in that book that's called Stories of the Prophets, that supposedly the angels, that they degraded Adam alayhi salam, his statement means that the angels objected to Allah just as the devil did. Na'udhu billah. When the angels were ordered to make sujood. So this is one of the statements that we're warning against, that is in that book. It is very popular. It is called Stories of the Prophets, and it contains that blasphemous sentence, Na'udhu billah. So when he said in that book that the angels, that they degraded Prophet Adam alayhi salam, it means that, and it's as if he's saying that the angels objected to Allah just as the devil objected when the angels were ordered to make sujood while the devil was present among them before he committed blasphemy. So that is that bad phrase that is warned against from that book, falsely called Stories of the Prophets. It is something that you should be warned against. As for the devil objecting and blaspheming and objecting to the order of Allah, this is mentioned in one of the verses of the Quran, or the story of it is mentioned, the objection of Iblis, in verse 61 of Surah Al-Isra. أَأَسْجُدُ لِمَنْ خَلَقْتَ طِينًا. So we see the supposed reasoning of the devil for not prostrating to Prophet Adam alayhi salam is that he claims he is better than Adam because Adam was made from clay. So that verse is saying, do I make sujood to the one whom you created from clay? And along with the ayah, قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. So in this verse, Surah Sad, verse 76, he even says it more explicitly, where he says that the devil is saying that he is better than Adam because Allah created him from fire and Adam from clay. So this degrading of Prophet Adam is the attribute of the devil, and it is not the attribute of the honored angels, those that know that our Master Adam alayhi salam is from the prophets, and that he has been chosen by Allah Ta'ala and honored above the angels. And the angels, they know that Prophet Adam alayhi salam, he is honored above them and he has a higher status than them, because Allah Ta'ala ordered them to make sujood, all of them to make sujood to Prophet Adam alayhi salam. And had it not been for the fact that Prophet Adam alayhi salam had a higher status than the angels, Allah Ta'ala would not have ordered them to make sujood to Prophet Adam alayhi salam. Allah Ta'ala grants the virtue and the honor and the higher status to whoever He wills amongst His creations. And had the only statement that was inside of that book that is authored by An-Najjar, this person that we're warning against, in that book that we're warning against, had that been the only thing that was wrong in it, that would suffice for it to be an obligation, for it to be warned against. And more severe than that statement that we warned against in that book is about the so-called theory of evolution. where he says in it, he says, we have the Quran. Now remember, this is the statement, a bad statement, a corrupt statement of the person who authored that book that we are warning against. Na'udhu billah. So, he says, this is what he says. He says, we have the Quran that proves by its apparent statements that the origin of the human is Adam and not an ape that turned or that supposedly evolved, nor something else, and this is the trustworthy. And so if the people who have these theories, if they reach to the definitive proofs that make this story something that is known through the inherent mind, which would be equal to equal to knowing it through the inherent mind, that every pair splits up. Now, of course, some of this speech doesn't make sense, but that's how it is with misguided people. So don't try to make sense of it. But he says, every pair splits up into two equal pieces, and that the sky is above us and the earth is below us. Then it is incumbent upon us to interpret the Quran to align with reality, just like it is the principle in the Quran that it is taken by its apparent without interpretation, except if there is something that prevents from making interpretation or from taking the apparent, and so the interpretation is made. Basically, he's saying that, and he's trying to say that it's permissible to make ta'wil, to have ta'wil, or to interpret a verse of the Quran from other than its apparent meaning without a valid religious proof, without a valid religious reason. And this is playing with the Quran. If somebody takes a verse of the Quran out of its apparent meaning without a valid religious reason, then it's as if he's treating the Quran like a toy. And the Quran is clear and free from being played around with. So how could he claim in his thought that there is a mental proof that makes it incumbent upon us to interpret the verses of the Quran when there is nothing close to a proof for that? So his saying, that saying of his, it's like calling people, opening the door for people to play with the meanings of the Quran. So basically, it's kind of as if he's saying to interpret the verses of the Quran to fit into the theory of evolution and other such types of misguided things. And also among what is in this book, in that book that we're warning against, is that he denies hadith that are talking about the descent or Prophet Jesus alayhi salam descending to the earth, and that he will eliminate the Dajjal, the one-eyed imposter. So he says, this bad person, he says this corrupt statement, and the following is an incorrect, corrupt statement. He says, the hadiths that are mentioned or narrated about Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, that he was taken up to the heavens in body and soul, and that he is alive in them, and that he will return at the end times, and that he will eliminate the one-eyed imposter. He said, this misguided person, An-Najjar, he said these hadiths were narrated and some of them are attributed to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and some of them are the opinions of scholars of tafsir, and some of them are from some of the people who embraced al-Islam from among the Jews, like Ka'b and Wahab, and whatever they are, he said, these are hadith that are singular in narration, that they have singular chains of narration. And he says that they do not reach to the degree of having the strength of an explicit verse of the Qur'an. And so he's trying to say, the verses of the Qur'an, all of them, they are religious evidence in the sense that they, you don't need to check the chains of narration, you don't need to do an investigation. All you need to do is, if it's a muhkam verse, if it's a verse that only has one meaning in the Arabic language, then that's that. If it's a mutashabih, then you need to know the interpretation. But either way, the Qur'an, the strength of evidence in the Qur'an is that it's mutawatir. It does not need to be investigated for the chain, for the authenticity, and it doesn't need to be verified. Was this actually an ayah of the Qur'an? No, it's known. Now for the hadith is different. If the hadith is mutawatir, then it's the same degree as the verse of the Qur'an. If it's not mutawatir, but it is something that has been narrated by more than 3 narrators, and it has 3 routes, 3 chains, and it's like that, 3 and more, from the Prophet ﷺ until us, and each one in the chain, they are trustworthy and accurate, then it does have the strength of it being confirmed. This is by, everybody accepts that. Now if the hadith only has 1 narrator, so 1 chain, let's say 1 narrator from the Prophet ﷺ, and then 1 person from that one who got it from the Prophet ﷺ, and then like that, and then later on in the chain, let's say there'll be more narrators, but from the Prophet ﷺ, there's only that 1 companion. So some imams, they said any hadith that is narrated like this, it's not going to be suitable to use as evidence in the creed, because it doesn't have at least 3 or more narrators from the Prophet ﷺ. So that's the difference of opinion with the imams. But even those imams that said that they don't accept the singular narrations, they said if everybody agrees to the authenticity of those narrators, it cannot be that there's a difference of opinion amongst some of them say he's trustworthy, some of them say he's not trustworthy, then they do accept it. So this author, he's trying to say that those hadith that were mentioned about Prophet Jesus alayhi salam returning to the earth, that they don't have that strength where they could be used as proof in the creed. Na'udhu billah. So basically he's saying that it's not possible for the person to have the certain belief that this is going to happen. That Prophet Jesus alayhi salam was taken to the heavens alive, and that he's going to return to the earth from the sky, and that he will execute a one-eyed person, or someone that is blind, or someone, yeah, they're talking about the Dajjal, but he's trying to use fancy words. So he's saying this is something that we cannot know for sure, subhanAllah, when this is actually confirmed. Actually, the hadith referring to the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Jesus ﷺ, returning to the earth, and the Dajjal, these are confirmed. Those narrations are confirmed. And it has the tawatur of the meaning. Subhanallah. And it is not hidden from you, O person who is reading, that this is a sly critique or criticism of the creed of the Muslims. And so this author of this book saying that those narrations that are talking about Prophet Jesus alayhi salam being elevated to the heaven, and that he will return at the end of times, and that he will execute and eliminate the Dajjal, and saying that those narrations, that they don't reach to the degree of the explicit verse of the Quran, and that it's not possible to be sure that these things are going to happen, that is a sly attack on the creed of the Muslims. Because the descent of Prophet Jesus alayhi salam is a matter that is by consensus. So that's another thing that's considered to be like proof and evidence, religious evidence, like a verse of the Quran, is the unanimous agreement of the mujtahids of a certain era upon a certain judgment. So this is called the consensus, the ijma'. So when the nation has a consensus on something, that means that it's correct, basically. It just means that it's correct. Because Allah Ta'ala, He revealed in the Quran that the nation of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they will not, that whoever opposes them, whoever goes against them, whoever goes against the way of the believers, that this person will be in hellfire. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam let us know that Allah Ta'ala guaranteed that His nation, yani that the Muslims, that they will never agree upon something that is misguided. So the fact that Prophet Jesus alayhi salam will descend from the heavens in the end times, this is by consensus, is by ijma'. So by saying that there's no way for us to know if this will happen, like the person in that book called Stories of the Prophets, his name is An-Najjar. So by him saying that this is something that we cannot know for certain, it's as if he is in a sly and slick and in a very concealed way bashing the creed of the Muslims, criticizing the creed of the Muslims, saying that the Muslims' creed is incorrect. So this is something that the scholars of the creed and the scholars who authored books in the creed and who authored texts in the creed, that they mention in their authorings about the return of Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, and that he will execute the Dajjal, and they concur that and they support that with evidence. So there is no meaning, there is no attention paid to the negation of Abdul Wahhab an-Najjar of that, except that he is being stubborn and he's insisting on being wrong, and it is a whim and it is arbitrary. And Allah Ta'ala, there's just something else. Another book that we will warn against is called, this book, obviously many people, you might find it in many places that call themselves masjid. It's called Fi Dhilal al-Quran, which is like in the shades of the Quran, is the translation. And another by the same author, another one that's called At-Taswir al-Fanni fil Quran, and other books of an evil person named Sayyid Qutb. So he authored a book called In the Shade of the Quran, or In the Shades of the Quran, and another book called The Artistic Imagery of the Quran, and other books that are written by Sayyid Qutb. He was a bad person. So among the things that we're obligated to warn against emphatically are the authorings of Sayyid Qutb, who at the beginning of his career, he was a reporter, a Marxist journalist, and then he became involved with an evil organization that calls themselves Hizb al-Ikhwan, or that calls themselves the Muslim Brotherhood. That organization, it is not permissible to call them the Muslim Brotherhood because their creed is not the creed of Islam. They are not Muslims, and also they are not a brotherhood, as their founder said during his life, the founder of that organization. They they went astray during the lifetime of the founder. They have a lot of misguided issues. But so in Arabic they're known as Hizbul Ikhwan, and in English they call themselves the Muslim Brotherhood. So these people obviously have to be warned against, and so Sayyid Qutb, he became their spokesperson at a certain point in time. So among the main misguidances of this deviant faction that calls themselves the Muslim Brotherhood, among the misguidances that they have is that they judge that humanity has apostatized, or they judge that humanity are non-Muslims, that all the people have become non-Muslims. And you'll find that in his book, that's called Fi Dhilal al-Quran. And also in his book there contains likening Allah to his creations. And he calls Allah, na'udhu billah, this is a blasphemous thing, he calls Allah the creating feather. So Sayyid Qutb, he refers to Allah as the creating feather, which is explicit blasphemy. As for their takfir, or deeming as blasphemers humanity, is because one of their corrupt principles is they believe that if you live in a country or under a government that does not implement the Islamic law, even if you are not participating in the infrastructure or in the parliament or in the government, if you're just a citizen and you're not rebelling against that government and trying to overthrow them and take up arms against them, if you're not doing that, then according to this group that's called Hizbul Ikhwan, they believe that you are a kafir. They believe that you are a blasphemer because you don't take up arms against the secular governments. And of course they got exposed for their hypocrisy because they were a strong movement in Egypt, and they were unaliving political members of political parties in the name of supposedly implementing Islam, until it was their turn to become elected to the parliament, and then all of a sudden they did not, turn down those political positions, even though they were not implementing the Islamic law. Na'udhu billah. But anyway, so Sayyid Qutb, he was the spokesperson for that group called Hizbul Ikhwan, the Muslim, so-called Muslim Brotherhood. And he wrote those books, and in that book he called Allah the creating feather, and he also called Allah, which is blasphemy, and there's no way around it, and he also called Allah the managing mind, na'udhu billah, and other types of statements that the scholars of Islam, they have categorized them among the statements that make the person exit from Islam. And also Sayyid Qutb, he insulted Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and Prophet Yusuf and Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and in his book. For example, he talked about Prophet Musa alayhi salam. He called Prophet Musa a hothead, that he has a temper, and the equivalent of saying that he's a hothead, na'udhu billah, and other types of things, na'udhu billah. He said about our Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, that he, of course, is not true and is incorrect and is blasphemous to say. He said about Prophet Yusuf that he almost fell into the temptation of fornication, na'udhu billah. That he was almost fell weak in front of that woman, na'udhu billah. And also about Prophet Ibrahim, he said another blasphemous thing. He said about Prophet Ibrahim that he would look at the sky and he would see a star and he would think this is his God or this is his Lord. And then when it disappeared, he would say, I don't like the things that disappear. and he would look at something bigger and he would see the moon and he would say, "This is my Lord." Na'udhu billah. Sayyid Qutb said about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam that when he would see the stars, he would think that is his Lord. And that when he would see the moon, that he would think that is his Lord. And then when he would see the sun, he would think that is his Lord. So he attributes to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam worshipping the stars and the sun and the moon. Na'udhu billah. So in reality, what is mentioned in the Quran, هَذَا رَبِّي, it is called a type of question. The purpose of it is to negate a negative interrogative, if you want to call it that. But basically, just like if someone tells you, let's go eat at such and such restaurant, the food there is so delicious, etc., the service is so elite, etc., and then you go there and the service is bad and the food tastes horrible, and you tell him, this is a good restaurant. So that's the same thing. هَذَا رَبِّي is negating, is not Prophet Ibrahim saying, this is my Lord. It's Prophet Ibrahim saying, is this what you are claiming I should worship? So he's saying, this is not my Lord, basically. However, Sayyid Qutb, because he was most likely a plant, of course, because of his background, Marxist journalists, they used to write articles to encourage people to march through the streets without any clothes on, advocating for nudism in public. So he has a story of being a plant. He was educated in the United States. He spent some time here, etc. So then he came out and he was supposedly an author of Islamic material. And part of the things that he authored is saying about the prophets, about Prophet Moses, that he's a hothead, that he has a temper problem. Saying about Prophet Yusuf that he almost fornicated, that he was about to fornicate with the wife of the governor. Saying about Prophet Ibrahim that he used to worship the stars and the moon and the sun. Na'udhu billah. So those books need to be warned against. They're found in many places that claim to be masjids. They're in the library section. Like you just go and there's like a bunch of books there, mushafs and books of the Quran and stuff. And you'll find that book. It's called Fi Dhilal al-Quran, which means in the shades of the Quran, and another one that's called the artistic imagery of the Quran. It's filled with blasphemy. Be warned against it. You should not read books on your own. The Islamic material and the Islamic knowledge is not acquired through reading the books on your own. This is not like reading a novel. This is not like reading a comic book. It's not for entertainment. It's for learning and knowledge. And the way that occurs is by acquisition, by learning from a trustworthy person who acquired it with a connected chain leading back to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. In the next class, and we have a couple more books to warn against. The next one that we're going to warn against is a book that is authored by Afif Abdul Fattah Tabbara. And then we'll warn against another book, and then we'll finish. I think the next class will finish. Yeah. And then we'll start, inshallah, another book that's going to be about the minor and major signs of Judgment Day, of the final days, the end of the world, which we're currently living in the final days, and many of the small signs have appeared, but we're going to talk in details. There's over 35 minor signs that are talked about in detail. We'll mention them, inshallah, and then we'll talk about the 10 major signs and some details accompanied with that, and the wars and conflicts that take place leading up to the one-eyed impostor and to the descent of Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, inshallah. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه